The final meals of death row inmates have long been a source of curiosity and speculation. What would you choose if it was your last meal? We delve into this poignant question by exploring some of the strangest last meal requests by those on death row, beginning with Philip Workman's altruistic request. Number 1. Philip Workman's vegetarian pizzas for the homeless. Philip Workman's last meal request stood out, not because it was extravagant or bizarre, but because it displayed an unusual level of selflessness and concern for others, even in his final hours. Workman was sentenced to death in Tennessee in 1982 for the murder of a police officer during a botched robbery. Yet, his final wish would serve to briefly humanize him in the eyes of the public. His request was simple: a large vegetarian pizza to be delivered to a homeless person in Nashville. However, it was denied by the prison system, stating they did not donate to charity. Undeterred by this rejection, Workman's wish reached the public, triggering a surge of empathy and generosity. Individuals across the state and even beyond began delivering pizzas to homeless shelters in Workman's name, turning his request into an unexpected act of solidarity. His request raised questions about guilt, humanity, and the prospect of redemption within the justice system. It encouraged a conversation on the treatment of the homeless population and brought a sense of community amidst a tragic event. While the pizza itself was nothing out of the ordinary, Workman's request was unique because it wasn't for him. It was for those less fortunate. His legacy lived on even after his execution on May 9, 2007. The story of Workman's request still resonates, serving as a reminder that humanity can exist even in the darkest corners and under the harshest circumstances. His final wish managed to unite strangers and encourage acts of compassion, proving that it's never too late to make a positive impact on others. Workman's final request stands as one of the most selfless last meal requests in the history of the American penal system. His request for a vegetarian pizza may have been unusual, but it was undoubtedly one of the most impactful last meal requests on record. In an instance where personal indulgence was expected, Philip Workman opted for compassion, making his last meal truly unforgettable. Number 2. Robert Dale Conklin's Haute Cuisine. While some death row inmates choose comfort food or favorite meals from their past for their final meal, Robert Dale Conklin took a different route. Conklin, sentenced to death in Georgia for the murder of his lover in 2001, used his final meal as an opportunity to experience fine dining for one last time. His choice for the last meal would be more in line with a Michelin-starred restaurant than a prison menu. He requested a stuffed filet mignon wrapped in puff pastry, a salad of butter lettuce, English peas, and applewood smoked bacon topped with a Dijon vinaigrette, asparagus soup, roasted heirloom tomatoes, a baked potato with cheddar cheese, sour cream, chives, and real bacon bits, toasted sesame seed bread with butter, goat cheese, and cantaloupe, finished off with creme brulee, strawberries, and a mint sprig. Even in prison, Conklin demonstrated a refined palate, requesting an elaborate gourmet meal that surpassed the usual requests. He opted for quality ingredients, meticulous preparation, and sophisticated recipes. His unusual request left an indelible mark on the history of last meals. It's worth noting that the prison staff put a substantial amount of effort into fulfilling Conklin's request. Conklin's request was so extravagant that it drew national attention. However, the staff managed to recreate his requested menu, albeit with some necessary substitutions due to the limited availability of certain ingredients within the prison. Conklin's final meal was a stark departure from the usual burgers, steaks, or fried chicken commonly requested. Instead, he showcased an appreciation for fine dining that is rarely seen in such circumstances. This unusual request reflected a side of Conklin the public rarely got to see. A man with a taste for the finer things in life, yearning for a moment of pleasure and sophistication before his death. Conklin was executed on July 12, 2005. His last meal remains one of the most extravagant ever requested on death row, a testament to his unusual pursuit of gourmet experience within the constraints of prison life. This lavish feast goes down in history as one of the most peculiar and highbrow final meal requests ever recorded. Number 3. James Edward Smith's Dust Request. In the history of last meal requests on death row, perhaps none is more puzzling than that of James Edward Smith. Smith was a former tarot card reader who was sentenced to death in Texas for a fatal armed robbery in 1983. His request was markedly different from his peers, not only because it wasn't edible, but also because of its profound spiritual implications. Smith's request for his last meal was not for a lavish feast or comfort food, but rather a pile of dirt. His reasoning behind this peculiar request was grounded in his spiritual beliefs. Smith was reportedly a practitioner of voodoo and black magic, and he intended to use the dirt in a ritual to mark his transition from the physical world to the spirit realm. Instead, he was given a cup of yogurt as a substitute. This refusal from the prison authorities marks an interesting point in the narrative of last meal traditions. While attempts are often made to fulfill the requests of the condemned, the boundaries of what can be requested are still clearly defined. The strange request sheds light on the unique cultural and spiritual considerations that can come into play during the process of choosing a last meal. In Smith's case, his final meal was less about indulging in earthly pleasures and more about preparing for the spiritual journey that he believed lay ahead of him. Even in his final moments, Smith adhered firmly to his beliefs, using his last meal as a symbolic rite. This starkly contrasts with the traditional view of the last meal as an opportunity for indulgence or nostalgia. Instead, Smith used this occasion as an opportunity for ritualistic preparation, adding an intriguing layer of complexity to the history of last meal requests. James Edward Smith was executed on June 26, 1990. His request for a pile of dirt as his last meal remains one of the most unconventional and baffling in the history of death row. Despite its denial, it underscores the diverse range of last meal requests and how they can serve as a lens into the personal beliefs and mental states of those facing their final moments. Number 4. Lawrence Russell Brewer's excessive feast. Lawrence Russell Brewer's last meal request was infamous not for its eccentricity, but for its sheer excessiveness. A white supremacist sentenced to death in Texas for the racially motivated murder of James Byrd Jr. in 1998, Brewer opted for a decadent final feast. His request was so extravagant that it led to the discontinuation of the last meal tradition in Texas. For his last meal, Brewer requested a feast that was both large in quantity and diverse in content. His request included 2 chicken-fried steaks smothered in gravy with sliced onions, a triple-meat bacon cheeseburger, a cheese omelet with ground beef, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and jalapenos, a large bowl of fried okra with ketchup, 1 pound of barbecued meat with half a loaf of white bread, 3 fajitas with all the toppings, a Pizza Hut meat lover's pizza, 1 pint of Bluebell ice cream, a slab of peanut butter fudge with crushed peanuts, and 3 root beers. However, what truly marked Brewer's last meal as a historical event was not its composition, but the aftermath. Despite ordering a feast that could easily feed multiple people, Brewer didn't eat a single bite of it. This act of seeming wastefulness outraged public officials and the public alike, leading to a statewide policy change. As a result of the outrage sparked by Brewer's request, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice ended the tradition of personalized last meals, substituting them instead with regular prison meals. The case of Lawrence Russell Brewer serves as an example of how the last meal can be used not just as a source of comfort or a final wish, but also as a political statement or a tool for manipulation. Brewer's refusal to consume his extravagant meal can be viewed as an act of defiance, a final expression of control over his circumstances. Despite being a grim episode in the history of last meals, Brewer's case raises important questions about the purpose and management of the last meal tradition. It serves as a stark reminder of the potential for exploitation within this system and the implications of individual actions on collective practices. The story of Lawrence Russell Brewer's last meal remains a significant chapter in the narrative of death row and its traditions. Number 5. Victor Feguer's single olive. Victor Feguer's last meal request remains one of the most perplexing in the history of death row. Feguer was sentenced to death in Iowa for the kidnapping and murder of a doctor in 1960. His last meal request was not a feast or a favorite childhood dish, but a solitary olive. This simple request holds a depth of symbolism and a touch of mystery that continues to intrigue those who learn of it. The olive was an unusual choice for a last meal, especially in comparison to the traditionally more indulgent requests of other inmates. However, Feguer's request was not random. It carried symbolic weight in many cultures, signifying peace and reconciliation. In choosing the olive, Feguer may have been making a statement about his feelings towards his fate, a silent plea for peace in his final moments. Another interpretation of his request suggests that he believed in the power of rebirth and regeneration, as an olive tree can be grown from a single olive's pit. This understanding of his choice could hint at a desire for renewal or a belief in life after death. The prison staff honored Feguer's request, and he was given a single olive, complete with a pit. When Feguer was executed on March 15, 1963, officials discovered that he had kept the olive pit in his suit pocket, further adding to the mystery and speculation around his unusual last meal. Feguer's last meal request remains as one of the most unique and enigmatic in the history of death row. The single olive, a symbol of peace and potential renewal, was a stark departure from traditional last meals, serving as a poignant reminder of the humanity behind the individuals on death row. The simple yet profound nature of Feguer's last meal request continues to intrigue and inspire curiosity, marking it as one of the most intriguing last meal requests on death row. Number 6. Peter J. Menial's overindulgence. Peter J. Menial, a death row inmate in Florida, made headlines with his excessively indulgent last meal request. Sentenced to death for the brutal murder of a young woman in 1992, Menial's final meal choice was far from understated. In fact, his request for an extravagant feast raised eyebrows and sparked debates about the ethics of allowing such excessive indulgence for individuals facing their ultimate punishment. For his last meal, Menial requested a veritable buffet of dishes, comprising 2 whole fried chickens, a bucket of fried shrimp, French fries, onion rings, a half-pound bacon cheeseburger, a pizza, a pitcher of milk, and a generous portion of ice cream. This excessive meal request not only stood out for its sheer volume, but also for the range of food items encompassing various cuisines and flavors. Menial's request for such an extravagant feast triggered public outrage, as many argued that providing a gluttonous last meal to a convicted murderer seemed inappropriate and a mockery of justice. Critics contended that offering such excessive indulgence to individuals who had committed heinous crimes contradicted the principles of punishment and accountability. The controversy surrounding Menial's last meal request prompted a reevaluation of the practice itself. In the aftermath of his request, some states, including Florida, implemented policies to limit the scope of last meal requests, either by imposing spending limits or by specifying that meals should be chosen from the prison's regular menu. Menial's choice to consume an excessive amount of food as his last meal raises questions about the motivations behind such requests. Was it a genuine desire to savor a final moment of pleasure and excess, an attempt to assert control over his circumstances, or simply an act of defiance? The case of Peter J. Menial's last meal exemplifies the delicate balance between acknowledging the humanity of death row inmates and addressing public concerns about the ethical implications of providing excessive indulgence. It stands as a reminder that the concept of the last meal is not without controversy, with diverging opinions on its significance and appropriateness within the context of capital punishment. Number 7. Thomas J. Grasso's SpaghettiOs controversy. Thomas J. Grasso's last meal request became the center of controversy and sparked widespread debate about the nature of last meals on death row. Grasso, convicted of 2 murders in Oklahoma, faced execution in 1995. His request for a specific brand of canned pasta, SpaghettiOs, stirred up a significant legal and moral dispute, ultimately leaving a lasting impact on the tradition of last meals. Grasso's choice of SpaghettiOs as his last meal was considered by many to be an ordinary and modest request. However, the controversy arose not from the meal itself, but from Grasso's claim that he had been promised a different brand of pasta, Chef Boyardee. He argued that the prison authorities had violated his rights by substituting his requested brand, leading to a legal battle that escalated to the courts. The case surrounding Grasso's last meal request highlighted the intricate details and potential discrepancies that can arise in the administration of final meals. The issue of whether an inmate is entitled to receive their specific request or if substitutions are permissible became the focal point of legal arguments and public discourse. Grasso's legal team argued that the denial of his requested brand of pasta constituted a violation of his rights and showed disregard for his final wishes. On the other hand, the prison authorities contended that they had provided a similar substitute and had not violated any obligations. The controversy reached the Oklahoma Supreme Court, which ultimately ruled against Grasso, stating that the prison had not violated any rights by providing a reasonable substitute for the requested pasta brand. The court held that there was no obligation for the prison to fulfill specific brand requests, as long as a comparable meal was provided. The case of Thomas J. Grasso's last meal request raised broader questions about the purpose and significance of last meals on death row. Critics argued that the attention and resources dedicated to fulfilling individualized requests detracted from the gravity of the punishment and diverted focus from the victims and their families. The controversy surrounding Thomas J. Grasso's last meal request highlighted the complex dynamics involved in catering to the final wishes of death row inmates. It raised important questions about the balance between granting individual requests and maintaining a fair and consistent approach to the administration of last meals. Grasso's case serves as a reminder that even seemingly ordinary requests can spark legal battles and shape the evolution of policies related to the tradition of last meals on death row. Number 8. Ricky Ray Rector's Saved Dessert. The last meal request of Ricky Ray Rector captured the attention of the public and raised ethical questions about the practice of granting final meal wishes on death row. Rector, convicted of a double murder in Arkansas, faced execution in 1992. However, it was his unusual request and the circumstances surrounding it that made his case unique. Rector's final meal request included steak, fried chicken, cherry Kool-Aid, and a pecan pie. What made his request stand out was not the food itself, but rather his decision to save the pecan pie for later. Rector insisted on setting aside his dessert with the intention of consuming it after his execution, as if preserving it for a future moment that he believed would come. The act of saving the pecan pie sparked debate about Rector's mental capacity and understanding of his impending fate. Rector had sustained a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head years prior, resulting in significant brain damage. His lawyers argued that his request to save the dessert was evidence of his impaired mental state and inability to comprehend the finality of death. The case of Ricky Ray Rector's saved dessert raised concerns about the ethics of carrying out the execution of an individual with diminished cognitive abilities. Opponents of the death penalty argued that executing Rector would be tantamount to killing a mentally disabled person. They believed that his request to save the pecan pie demonstrated his lack of understanding and should be taken as evidence of his diminished mental capacity. Despite the controversy, Rector was executed on January 24, 1992. His case, however, continues to evoke discussions about the treatment of individuals with mental impairments within the criminal justice system. The pecan pie that Rector saved symbolizes a significant aspect of his case, his limited comprehension of the irreversible nature of his impending execution. It serves as a reminder of the complex moral and legal questions surrounding the death penalty and the capacity of individuals with mental disabilities to fully comprehend their circumstances. The pecan pie that Ricky Ray Rector preserved as a symbolic testament to his mental impairment continues to challenge the justice system's approach to individuals with cognitive limitations on death row. It serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities and ethical dilemmas inherent in carrying out executions and underscores the need for careful consideration of an individual's mental state in capital punishment cases. Number 9. Ronnie Lee Gardner's unusual last viewing. Ronnie Lee Gardner's last moments before his execution took an unusual turn with his request for an unorthodox last viewing. Gardner, convicted of murder in Utah, faced a firing squad execution in 2010. In a departure from traditional last moments, Gardner requested to watch the 1990 action film The Expendables as his final viewing. Gardner's choice of a movie for his last viewing raised eyebrows and sparked discussions about the significance and appropriateness of the request. While most death row inmates spend their last moments in quiet reflection or prayer, Gardner opted for a blockbuster action film, known for its high-intensity sequences and adrenaline-pumping plot. The choice of The Expendables as his final viewing was seen by some as an attempt to project a tough and defiant image until his last breath. The film, featuring a star-studded cast of action heroes, resonated with Gardner, who may have identified with the rugged characters and their relentless pursuit of justice. It is worth noting that Gardner's request for a movie viewing was a deviation from the norm. While inmates are typically given the opportunity to choose their last meal, last words, or engage in spiritual practices, the request for a specific film viewing was relatively uncommon. Gardner's execution by firing squad on June 18, 2010, marked the end of a controversial and highly publicized case. His request to watch The Expendables as his final viewing left a lasting impression, serving as a reminder of the complex and individual nature of the last moments on death row. Ronnie Lee Gardner's choice of The Expendables for his last viewing challenged the traditional expectations of solemnity and reflection during the final moments before an execution. His request highlighted the individuality of death row inmates and their desires to assert control and shape their narrative until the end. While some may view Gardner's choice as a defiant act or a reflection of his own troubled past, others may interpret it as a desire to confront the violence and consequences of his actions. Whatever the motive, Gardner's request for an unusual last viewing left an indelible mark on the history of last moments on death row. Number 10. Odell Barnes's existentialist request. Odell Barnes's last meal request carried a profound philosophical undertone, reflecting his unique perspective on life and death. Convicted of murder in Texas, Barnes faced execution in 2000. His request for an existentialist-inspired last meal sparked contemplation and debate about the meaning of existence in the face of mortality. Rather than selecting a specific dish or indulging in extravagant desires, Barnes requested a diverse assortment of items that encompassed a range of flavors and textures. His final meal consisted of justice, equality, world peace, a salad with French dressing, fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, cornbread, black-eyed peas, and a glass of ice water. This seemingly cryptic request contained a symbolic message that aligned with his existentialist worldview. Barnes's request for justice, equality, and world peace went beyond the realm of gastronomy. It was an existentialist statement that highlighted his concern for the human condition and his desire for a more just and harmonious society. By incorporating these intangible concepts into his last meal, Barnes sought to emphasize the importance of the existential quest for meaning and purpose. Existentialism is a philosophical school of thought that grapples with the individual's search for meaning and the significance of human existence in an inherently chaotic and absurd world. Barnes's last meal request demonstrated his engagement with existentialist ideas by transcending the material and engaging with abstract ideals. Barnes's existentialist-inspired last meal request encouraged contemplation about the nature of life and the inevitable encounter with death. It challenged the traditional understanding of last meals as merely satisfying physical cravings, and instead invited a deeper exploration of the human condition and the search for purpose. His request invited reflection on the existential themes of justice, equality, and peace, prompting observers to confront the ethical and societal implications of capital punishment. Barnes's last meal request left a lasting impact, serving as a reminder of the existential questions that arise in the face of mortality and the inherent complexities of the death penalty. Despite the profound and thought-provoking nature of his request, Barnes was executed on March 1, 2000. His existentialist-inspired last meal remains a testament to his intellectual engagement and desire to provoke deeper introspection and dialogue about the meaning of life and the pursuit of justice. Odell Barnes's last meal request stands out as an enigmatic and existentialist statement in the context of death row. It challenges the notion of last meals as purely indulgent or personal and invites contemplation about the human condition, societal values, and the pursuit of a more equitable world. His request serves as a reminder that even in the face of imminent death, individuals may find ways to express their philosophical perspectives and engage in existential inquiry.